The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station. The Global View on.
So a very pleasant good evening to you at home or in your vehicle if you are on the road or at work or listening on the radio or on the internet. Thank you so much for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. It is Tuesday, the 14th day of July 2026, the 20th Tuesday of 2026, and it's 8 p.m. on the button in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies and on QTV. Please follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Q95 FM Radio. Share the live, like our pages, or on your phone numbers or on the home page of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. This is our 19th Global View on Q show for 2026, and we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. With me tonight is my co-host Justice Dr. Irving Andre, Attorney Mark Douglas, and former Dominica UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire. Good evening to all of you gentle people around the table, on the internet, on the Facebook, on the YouTube, and all over the place. Tonight we are delighted to discuss the topic, is Dominica's main revenue stream from the CBI program dead or dying? What was done with the billions of CBI dollars collected over the years? Has it been put to productive, resilient, or sustainable use? Can Dominica survive the impacts of the EU and US visa sanctions? And is Dominica now also bedeviled by crypto corruption? Here are a few talking points or questions, if you like. Have we now heard the death knell of the CBI program? Have corrupt practices finally caught up with it? Is the gig now up for our leaders? Would Dominica be compensated by the US and the EU for corrupt CBI program? The OECS's response from the recent meeting in Dominica was curiously weak. If the CBI program suddenly derails, which appears likely, will Dominica's national capital budget collapse? Are those who criticize corruption in the CBI program enemies of the state, or are they in fact the true patriots? Is Dominica now also bedeviled by crypto corruption? As the European Union and the United States now put the final nail in the CBI coffin, is the CBI considered to be a national security risk by the US, the EU, and other countries? Can Dominicans survive the impacts of the EU and US visa sanctions? Dominicans born in Dominica and living at home or abroad in the diaspora are paying a very heavy price for sins possibly committed by CBI citizens born outside of Dominica, who may, in fact, be seeking refugee status in the EU and US and other countries, especially those from countries banned from obtaining visas from these countries for national security reasons. And finally, 10, what policies, strategies, and actions need to be implemented to replace the revenues lost from the CBI program? So we look forward to the contributions of Justice Dr. Irving Andre, Attorney Mark Douglas, and former Dominica UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire on this topic. Is Dominica's main revenue stream from the CBI program dead or dying? What was done with the billions of CBI dollars collected over the years? Has it been put to productive, resilient, or sustainable use? Can Dominica survive the impacts of the EU and US visa sanctions? And is Dominica now also bedeviled by crypto corruption? So as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give our usual huge shout out and big thank you to our farmers, our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, and public and private sector patriots and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. We welcome each and every one, every Dominican and every friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. Thank you, Lambi, on the console directing the traffic. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. So I go now to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his first comments on this topic. Is Dominica's main revenue stream, the CBI program, dead or dying? What happened to the billions? Can Dominica survive the impacts of the EU and US visa sanctions? And is Dominica also bedeviled by crypto corruption? Over to you, Dr. Andre.
Thank you for your introduction, Mr. G. Let me say welcome to our fellow panelists, Attorney Mark Douglas, based in the United States, Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, Potentate Mr. Lambi, and the engineer par excellence, Sherwin, and yourself, Mr. G. Let me say also good evening to your listeners all over, who at least have the interest of Dominica at heart, which is not something that we can say for everyone. I was listening to Matt Peltier's program not a few days ago, and there was a young man who was being interviewed by Matt. And unfortunately, many of his family members had lost their lives on account of Hurricane Maria. And as it was not unexpected, unusual, he was promised a place to live so that he could build back his life. And surprise, the promise remains unfulfilled. And he was left to agitate for himself. And what was telling about his story, he recounted how a minister of government, a member of the ruling party, told him that if he expressed his grievances publicly, particularly on your radio station, Mr. G, he would be viewed or he would become an enemy of the state. So tonight I start with that designation. I start with who or what is the real enemy of the state of Dominica, because we have to call a spade in these difficult times. These difficult times when most of the major North American, European countries have identified Dominica in the most negative of ways. And they have done so because of a reckless, insidious policy of selling passports to the highest bidder for one purpose: to enable those who purchase those passports, particularly the many persons of dubious backgrounds, illegal backgrounds, to be able to gain entry in these countries using Dominican passports, in some cases diplomatic passports, as a vehicle to gain such an entry. And we'll come to that in a minute, because I will address the stupidity of a leader, I think it's in Antigua, telling the United States, Europe, and England that if they want Dominica, St. Lucia, Antigua, probably St. Kitts, to do away with this program, those countries should compensate us. They should compensate us for not selling passports to criminals and therefore threatening their security infrastructure. It makes no sense. It's asinine. It's idiotic, to put it bluntly. But I digress. So if not the patriots who have called out those programs, if they're not the enemies of the state, then who is or what is? Well, the answer in my view is clear. The major enemy of the state that has Dominica in this unfortunate predicament, that has Dominica in a state where, quite frankly, it is hard for them to emerge from if they remain on that path, is pure, unadulterated, pure, unchecked, pure, unrivaled greed. That's all there is to it. Greed. Because the sale of passports despite the protestations of the political directorate that net proceeds of sale enables them to build housing. Let's not talk about the quality of housing. It speaks for itself. It enables them to hire persons, such as people involved in the NEP program. And we know how many months these workers who were paid very modest wages have to wait to get their wages. It is pure adulterated greed. Because Ali Reza Monfared, whatever his name is, his associate warned us years ago that 90% of those sales, they go into the private coffers of members who play ball with the political directorate. And it's only 10% that inure to the benefit of Dominicans. So this is my main thesis. Like a grim reaper, greed has stalked the landscape of Dominica. It has blighted the lives of both rich and poor, sick and healthy, young and old, Jews and Gentiles. Is it not the silent predator which has hidden hundreds of millions of dollars from the CBI program in mysterious accounts? According to one of our ambassadors called Zampoli, ambassadors, mind you. Is it not the silent killer that has caused loss of life at our own hospital because of a lack of adequate medical supplies? Is it not this hunger for riches, this obsession, I should say, acquired not by the sweat of one's brow, but by the sleight of hand or backhand deals that is robbing Dominica blind? Is it not the pack of wolves dressed in Gucci clothing that have sullied Dominica's reputation in the UK, US, and Europe? Is it not this monster that have fueled our leaders' hunger for scandalous wealth, palatial houses, obscene salaries, all acquired on the backs of ordinary Dominicans? Is it not the greed of those who thirst, not for righteousness, Mr. G, but for riches, that have deprived Dominicans of their freedom to travel, to send their children to study overseas, to seek medical attention in North America, to sell their produce in the US, VI, Guadeloupe, and Martinique? Is it not runaway greed disguised in gifts of no-bid contracts that continue to rob our local contractors, truckers, skilled workers of their right to earn a living in their own country? Is it not greed that makes certain religious leaders wrap their arms around their duty-free SUVs and turn a blind eye to a member of their flock who can hardly put a 2-pence bread on their table, who can hardly survive, to quote Danny Luge, in this half-pound economy? Is it not greed that prompts a leader to use misappropriated funds from the CBI program to finance general elections for the sole purpose of stealing said elections? Is it not greed that forces NEP workers to wait for months to get paid while their leader drives or is driven in a 6-figure air-conditioned SUV or sedan? Is it not greed, Mr. G, that enables or prompts or induces certain Dominicans tied to the political directorate to engage in the transactions involving cryptocurrency? Isn't that the most recent manifestation of what Dominica has become? And bear in mind one thing: to the extent that anyone was arrested on account of alleged involvement in that type of transaction, the orders would have come from abroad. One thing we know, irrespective of what positions we take on this issue, our local constabulary would not on their own have arrested anybody if they had not received directives from a superior authority. And if that is the case, then that is a measure of how serious, how endemic that corruption is is now. It also indicates that for those of us, those doubting Thomases, Those who are saying it's the opposition who are crying wolf, whether they admit it or not. But the fact of the matter is simple, and probably Attorney Mark Douglas might assist us in that part of his presentation. The word is out that Dominica stands for nothing that is regarded as honest, something of integrity, decency, and good governance. And that the European countries and North America have to take a stand to protect their infrastructure, to protect their security infrastructure, to protect their economies from what obtains in Dominica and some other islands. This is not a case where we can say, well, Trump does it, so why not we? Trump doesn't depend on Dominica. Dominica depends on the US. That's where most of our barrels come from. That is the destination we send our children to study for the most part. That is where, for the most part, we seek medical attention. So this is not a situation where, well, monkey see, monkey do. We cannot afford to operate on that type of basis. The persons who are suffering are Dominicans on the ground, not foreigners who are buying these passports. So we are doing it to ourselves. There is no colonial authority or entity that we can blame. That is a thing of the past. So when you look at it from that perspective, Mr. G, and that's my final comment, and you listen to the comments of was it Sakinoy, Mr. Brown, Gaston, according to the fellow from Trinidad, Gaston, telling the US, if you want us to change our CBI program, you have to give us money. I will tell you what somebody said to me once in the market: your head not good. Your program is corrupted. It has been poisoned by greed. You are affecting or threatening the security architecture of Europe, England, and the United States. And you're asking them, sounds like blackmail to me, or extortion. You're asking them to give you money so you can stop your corrupt practices. Does that make sense? Any sense, Mr. G? Probably attorney and the ambassador can answer that question in their usual eloquent and erudite fashion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Andrew. And you know in Dominica what you would say, upani bon tête. Now, Crispin, in fact, as this corrupt practices finally caught up with the CBI program, we know Dominica has extensively sold passports to a lot of top people in some dubious organizations internationally. I believe the IRC, the Iranian Revolutionary Council Guard, I believe some of those people there got passports, and some of the leaders of some other countries out there got passports. And some of these people are persona non grata in some of these European countries. So really and truly, and then of course, as Dr. Andre mentioned, I mean, we saw some of our diplomats who were given diplomatic passports ended up in jail. So, I mean, is Europe to blame for what is going on there? Your thoughts on Crispin?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. G. Good evening, Dr. Andre, and my fellow panelist, Mr. Mark Douglas. And I also want to shout out Lambi and Sherwin. Tonight, and I should say good evening to all the listeners of Global View at home and abroad. Tonight we are addressing what I refer to a serious set of issues facing not just Dominica, but the OECS states, the member states of the Organization of East Caribbean States, except with the exception of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who doesn't really fall in that basket. But I hope they don't go down that road, because the new government in St. Vincent wants to have a CBI program. And I'm told that that prime minister was at the meeting held in Roseau on Friday. And well, he came to hear. I hope he's not a spy who came and sat there and I wouldn't say more than that. But here we are. Many of these countries close to 50 years of political independence. In another 2-3 years, with the possible exception of Grenada, which probably is ahead of the others, will be celebrating their 50 years soon, if not this year, maybe next year. But we will be in 2028. And I see what I can probably describe as an existential crisis. In that, maybe the biggest crisis that our countries have faced since we got political independence. Before we had the collapse of the banana regime, that we lost our preferential access to the European market. And that was a big challenge for us. We still haven't gotten over that one. And now this. What are the two things that are really of concern to me? One is the United States travel ban on Dominica and Antigua and Barbuda. These are the only two countries that have been singled out by the United States. And then last week, to my great surprise, the Prime Minister of Antigua felt it critically important for him to disclose something that none of the other CBI countries have had the gall to tell their people what is really happening. Except that we had this meeting on Friday, but I have not heard our Prime Minister mention to the Dominican people in what I thought would be a critically important address to the nation about what has happened with Europe. In that the European Commission wrote to every one of the prime ministers a letter that was dated some 25th of June, telling them that they will have to close their CBI programs by June 2028. So giving them a 24 months time period to get ready for that. Now, I first want to speak a little more, and I'm sure Mark will probably elaborate on that, on the US travel ban, because to me that is a double whammy we faced. On one hand, we have the US punishment on these islands. On the other hand, you have the European Union moving to punish 5 islands. The US travel ban, President Donald Trump, in his proclamation, I want to give a little background because I think it'll be important for listeners, because not all of the listeners would be too familiar with the details of this US travel ban. The US travel ban, which took effect 1st of January 2026, and we are now in July. And the travel ban ends visas to Dominicans, non-immigrant visas. By that I mean visitors visas, student visas, exchange student visas. So that's non-immigrant visas. But immigrant visas, that is the one that really bothers me. If your family who are in the US had filed a petition for you to become a permanent resident, to get a green card, and if your appointment was in 2026 at the embassy in Barbados, you've been waiting for 6-7 years for that call to Barbados to get your green card. That's suspended. That's suspended for until those countries, these two islands, Dominica and Antigua Barbuda, meet the conditions of the United States. So, but not only that, the worst one is it's affecting the people who are in the diaspora. Because if you had a green card in the diaspora and you elected to become a US citizen, that is suspended as well. So you cannot naturalize, your family cannot get their green cards. Students, there'll be no Dominican students coming to school in September. Well, August, some of these universities start in August and others in September. So there are no Dominican students getting student visas this year. So that is the severity of the problem we have. And all of these things are related to the CBI because we've not managed the CBI with the due diligence that we should. Mr. G mentioned that some of these passports are now in the hands of people that the United States don't like. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they have our passports. My good friend, Dr. Andre, mentioned that passports are being sold at discounted price. These are things that are not good. And passports are being sold to people who shouldn't have the passports. Now, what has happened here is quite concerning. And the most significant part is that no longer is the government getting income or significant income from the passports because they were sold on something that these agents, a lot of these agents was selling citizenship. And I remember some time ago, the Speaker of the Parliament admonishing my friend Sean Douglas that he should not mention in the Parliament about the sale of citizenship or sale of passports. And that was really, I don't know what this is, maybe he can tell me what are they selling? Because if they're not selling passports or citizenship, what is it they're selling? So these passports are in the hands of people who shouldn't have them. And the government has been sold, all of the 5 governments, strange enough, have been sold on what's called the real estate option. That is where the problem is. So they have no control of the money. The money is in the hands of these developers. And all of these developers are building hotels that the Dominican people don't have any ownership in it. You see, like the Kempinski Hotel, you think Dominica has any ownership of it? No. It's Range. And I won't go tonight in what Range did, but Range owes the Dominican people a lot. And they will one day have to account for how much money they earned and how much money they built the hotel for and where's the rest of the money. Now, so that is the US. The European Union, on the other hand, has been warning us for some time. I remember in 2025, the European Commission, they adopted a report under what they call the visa suspension mechanism. That was on the 18th of December, 2025. The report, it mentioned the 5 Eastern Caribbean states operating citizenship by investment programs, stating that they pose security risk as they may allow third country nationals who would normally require a visa to bypass the standard checks and obtain Schengen access. Schengen being the area, but 27 countries where when you enter that area with a Dominican passport, you would not need a visa. And once you're in that area, you can travel from one country to the next without ever seeing a customs officer or immigration officer. And the report goes on to say that schemes in these 5 Caribbean states, they raise concerns to Europe because of the high volumes, the number of people they are seeing coming in with Dominica passport or St. Lucia passport. So they're not natural born Dominicans. They're not natural born St. Lucians and St. Kitts and Grenada and so on. And despite the steps that would have been taken to strengthen the due diligence and information sharing, not there. So Europe has decided that a visa-free regime with these countries must come to an end. And Mr. G, that is where we are. You gave us a number of questions to point out, and I think as we go forward, we're going to address it. But this is what my introduction is. That is where we are. We a double whammy from United States and from Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Crispin. Now, Mark, Crispin introduced this question of the visas. Somebody's mic is open and getting a little feedback coming into my mic here. But Crispin did mention, in fact, the whole question of the U.S. travel ban. And in fact, we know that even in the U.S. now, even naturalized citizens from Haiti and some other countries under threat of being targeted for deportation by this current administration in the U.S. Give us your thoughts on some of that, and then your thoughts on genuinely the topic that we are introducing here on the table tonight, Mark.
Okay, good morning or good evening, Mr. G, Dr. Andre, Mr. Gregoire, Mr. Lambie, Sherwin, and the audience at large. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. You know, the first question that I have when I heard the topic for tonight, whenever I think of the Citizenship by Investment program, I ask myself a very basic question. How did we get here? Before I get into any of the aspects related to the visa restrictions and the like, the question is, from just a pure economic standpoint, how do you decide that the lion's share of your economy, of your GDP, is going to come from selling access to other countries? Because at the end of the day, we can have no pretense now as to what the CBI does and what it sells. I mean, if you want to pretend that you're selling access to Dominica, one might say umati umati, because these people are not in Dominica. The number of passports or citizenship passports that have been sold, we do not see them in any large mass in our small population. We would see them if they were coming. So we have to admit that what we are selling is access to the European Union and access to the United States. I know that personally, because as a Dominican raised in the US, at one point I was going to college and I decided to study abroad. And traveling on my Dominican passport, I was traveling in France. I had a visa to be in France. And one day I wanted to visit the UK. I didn't need a visa to go to the UK. I just arrived there with my Dominican passport and they welcomed me. So there were some privileges that you get just by having a Dominican passport. And that's the access that I guess someone at some point figured out, you know what? We can actually make some money off of this. But we should never forget the fact that we are actually selling access, not to our country, but to somebody else's land. And that other person, at any given time, can decide we are revoking your access and restricting your access. just as we as Dominicans at any given time can decide that we're going to restrict the access that we provide others, foreigners, to our lands. So that's the first thing, the sense of thinking of all my options to make a buck. That is the one that I'm going to tie my economy, the lifeline to my people, to the most. It's selling access to another person's land. One of the questions that Mr. G poses is whether or not the Citizenship by Investment program is dead. I don't think it is. The definition of dead is dead. You can't come back. And I do believe that this program can come back. Whether or not we should prioritize it as the program that we focus on in the future, that's a whole other question. But what we've seen with the Trump administration is that they've adopted what's called, they refer to at least, as the Don Rowe Doctrine. It piggybacks off of the name of the Monroe Doctrine, which was named after James Monroe. That doctrine is a 19th century doctrine that essentially tells European powers that were interested or thinking of colonizing new areas of the Western Hemisphere, that if you think that you're coming into this region and colonizing anew, we're going to deem you an enemy of the United States. Well, Trump, or President Trump, has said that he's adopting what's called a Don Rowe Doctrine. So after the visa restrictions that were announced in February, there was a renewed or expansion of that those visa restrictions in April, where the State Department announced that they were restricting visas to individuals from countries in our hemisphere, which the US considers Dominica to be within its hemisphere, who support our adversaries in undermining America's interests in the region. So you've seen that policy, and I think what's going on with the Citizenship by Investment program, I think we shouldn't take a narrow look at it to think that the US is focusing on Dominica and Antigua and citizenship by investment in particular. I believe what's happening with the restrictions that are placed on Dominicans, Antiguans, are part of a larger policy of the US within this hemisphere. And so the State Department announced that they were restricting visas for individuals that were taking positions that were adversarial to the United States interests. So you saw that in Venezuela. That was an indication that the Maduro regime was adversarial to US interests. Narcotics trafficking, the shooting of boats, unidentified individuals within the waters of our region as part of that doctrine. The president of Colombia, when he arrived in the United States for a UN function and gave a speech that was critical of the United States, his visa was immediately revoked. When the individuals in Brazil that prosecuted a former right-wing politician in Brazil, that was displeasing to the United States and the Trump administration, they withdrew the visas of all of the prosecutors. So when you look at what's going on with the visa restrictions in Dominica, I think you have to look at it within the larger context. Now, the State Department did define what they viewed as adversarial acts to the U.S. interests, and I'll read just for a quick second what the definition. Activities include, but are not limited to, enabling adversarial powers to acquire or control key assets and strategic resources in our hemisphere. Pause. can we think of any ways in which it may be even alleged that the Dominican government may have allowed an adversarial power, and just to be clear, China is viewed as an adversarial power to the United States. It's actually the US's #1 adversarial power, not my saying, it's what the US says to its people on a regular basis. And not President Trump. President Biden said the same thing. President Obama intimated the same thing as well. And so what are strategic resources that we may be providing to an adversary of the United States? I don't know if it's true or not, but if there is mining activity taking place in the Dubranche region, could that be, once again, allowing adversaries of the United States to control key resources within the hemisphere? A lot of people don't know that when one of the signature policies of the Trump administration was when he came into power and he announced Liberation Day, where he was announcing that there would be tariffs. The highest tariffs were placed against China because that's the US's #1 adversary. China reacted with its leverage that it has. And that primary leverage was to say, well, you know, America, you are dependent upon us for rare earth minerals. We control 70% of the rare earth minerals around the world. You need that for your manufacture of iPhones. You need that for the manufacture of your weapon system, including the F-15. You need that to manufacture e-vehicles. We control all that. You need that. If you impose these sanctions on us, we will restrict your access to these rare earth minerals. And almost quickly, President Trump announced, you know what, I take that back. We're going to reduce the tariff rate to China. When you consider that China has a significant influence within not just Dominica, but a number of other countries within the region, I think you have to consider that the policies that are being enacted by the United States with regards to visa restrictions are just the mechanism that's used to exert leverage against the countries within the region. Now, certainly, security concerns may be an issue as well, but I don't give as much weight to that because I'm very confident in the security mechanisms that the U.S. has when you enter the country. If you fly into the U.S., right now, I don't even speak, when I flew from Dominica about 3 weeks ago to the US, and when I went through customs, I almost didn't have to show him my passport. I'm not even sure that the immigration officer looked at my passport, because by the time I walked up to him, my face had been scanned. He knew exactly who I was. He knew my background. And the conversation must have lasted no more than 5 seconds. Welcome back. And so I think that anyone coming into the United States on a Dominican passport that was recently issued, they're not walking in freely. They're not sneaking through the back door. Now, it is certainly a security risk if the Dominican government doesn't cooperate with disclosing the information about these individuals. But it's certainly, I think, not the biggest reason why our visas are being restricted. So when we hear individuals say that we're cooperating with them for security concerns, that's really not what I think Trump really wants within the region. When you think about the Donroe Doctrine, he wants control over the assets within the region. Venezuela's oil, whatever is being extracted in terms of mining in Dominica, and so on in other countries. Now, my concern with the topic as well is that the Citizenship by Investment Program, whatever your feelings are about transacting in the sale of something that's core to the definition of a Dominican, what does it mean to be a Dominican? That's something that we're selling. whatever your feelings are about that, it has generated significant amounts of income for the country. The issue, respectfully, is that that opportunity that was created by that income was wasted, gaspillé. In that, if you look at the signature projects that have been pursued with that revenue, that's what the government tells us that they're doing with the money. You have Kempinski. When you compare that project to other projects that we have known to be successful in Dominica, you see that it lacks in a number of regards, in a number of economic benefits. Compare it to Ross. When Ross was created in Dominica in 1978, it allowed Dominicans not to have the government build homes for them, but a number of individuals acquired land in the Picard area, built their own homes. Their wealth exploded during that time. The small business owners that were created during that time that were selling their products at Ross, they didn't need a handout from the government. They had a business model that was working. They were making money. They didn't have to beg. They were empowered. If you ask yourself, has Kempinski empowered small businesses in the same way as Ross? It falls far short. If you ask yourself, will the international airport empower Dominicans in the same way? It likely will not. You know, we're expecting, or in the best case scenario, the international airport is built and you'll see an influx of visitors to Dominica, influx of money being spent in Dominica. Well, I'll tell you that I currently live in New York, which is the city that has the most Caribbean, individuals of Caribbean descent living in it in the United States, about 2 million individuals of Caribbean descent. And so when there was a direct flight from New York to Dominica, I thought that was amazing. I must have traveled on that flight a couple of times already. Lo and behold, the last time I sought to travel to Dominica, about 3 weeks ago, I tried to order that, to book a ticket on that same flight from United, and I was told that that flight has been suspended until I think maybe October, maybe hopefully it comes back during the tourist season. And I'm only speaking about what my personal experience has been, because, you know, Mr. G did say in the intro that if you hear it on Q, it's true. So if you hear it from me, it's my personal experience that I was not able to book a ticket because the flight from United from the New York area to Dominica directly is not available. And one could only surmise that it's not available because there's not a sufficient quantity of individuals that are flying during that time to make the flight economically viable for the airlines. And if that smaller plane landing in Douglas Charles can't be filled once a week, that every Saturday, from the city with the largest population of Caribbeans in the United States, do we honestly believe that once we have a larger international airport, that a bigger plane flying more frequently will have a larger influx of individuals into Dominica? And when those individuals arrive in Dominica, let's say they do, where are they staying? Are they expected to stay at the hotels that were created under the CBI program, Kempinski? When they spend those dollars in Kempinski, where does it circulate back in the Dominican economy? The way that American medical students were coming into Picard and buying their lunches from Dominicans taking excursions in Dominica. Their money was flowing and being paid directly to Dominicans. I hope the international airport has a positive impact, a ground shifting impact that benefits the average Dominican. I hope, but I'm still not understanding the math at this point. I know that we also had the topic of money laundering, but I note that the first two speakers didn't really spend much time on that. So perhaps that's something that we come back to later. So I'll leave it at that as my introduction.
Yes, we certainly will come back to that a little bit later. But Dr. Andre, I'm going to go to you, but before I go to you, I want to ask Lambi to give out the telephone number so we can maybe take a few calls. Dr. Andre, on the other side of that, I'm sure that you've taken a mental note of a lot of the food for thought that we got from Mark and from Crispin. And I know that you'll have some additional thoughts on this topic here tonight. Lambi, could you give out the numbers? Let's take a few calls.
Global View and Q, taking your calls at this moment. The numbers are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are local numbers. The international or the overseas number, 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers again. 449-3095, 3096, 3097, 616-4257. The overseas or international number, 305-432-9624. And we're standing by for your calls. Back to you, Mr. G.
Thank you, Lambi. Okay, so whenever the calls come in, just give us a little wave so we know that they're there and we'll take the calls. Dr. Andre, let me come back to you. I mean, this topic is intriguing. I mean, is the gig up now for the leaders of the region who have been involved in this CBI program? And
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I mean, when I grew up in Portsmouth, when someone was really sick, the word would go around town that he or she is on life water. The CBI program is on life water. That's just the bottom line. It's not by coincidence that many of the hotels that are under construction, for some reason, it has nothing to do with God, they have either ceased construction or construction has slowed down almost to a halt. Because let me put it this way. I had a conversation with somebody recently. Who in their right mind will want to purchase a passport at a time when most of the doors they're trying to enter are shut in their faces? Who in their right mind would find the Dominican passport attractive when the major Western countries have signaled an intention to place severe restrictions on those having those passports? And it is clear, in my respectful view, based on all the evidence that is available for anyone to see, that the justification of selling these passports is one, the delightful opportunity it gives to pocket much of the net sales of proceeds of those passports. What's his name? Ralph Gonzalez warned us. They love it because there's teeth in the money. He didn't specifically identify Dominica, but we know what he's talking about. And the evidence suggests that, not just anecdotal evidence, but evidence from the persons who are intimately involved in the program. And when we talk about building hotels, Crispin alluded to that. These hotels are not owned by Dominicans in any way, in any shape, in any form. I'm not an economist. I have no experience in building, except I have built a fall cage or two as a teenager. But these are not viable entities except for a few established hotels in Dominica. The occupancy does not justify that expenditure. So the justification for building these hotels is the delightful opportunity to launder the money, to transform it, to wash it, just as there was an expose by Rejak today on Matt's program. It is primary justification is to launder illegally obtained money, whether from the Revolutionary Guard, whether for some tin pot dictators in Eastern Europe or in Africa. Let me give you 2 examples. You remember that name, Susan Oldie? Mr. G, I think is your well, it's not a he, it's a she actually. She was sold a diplomatic passport for how much? $400,000. She flew to Dominica to get that passport. And what their senior counsel told us the money was used for? To fund elections. What about the Nigerian Sakinoi? Susan Maduike, Alison Maduike. I like that name, Susan. It was well known before she was given a passport was brought to her in England for over $1 million, diplomatic passport, mind you, that she was a crook fleeing the clutches of the Nigerian law enforcement. And guess what? When she was about to be arrested in England, what did she flash? A Bible? No, the Dominican passport. So we understand the gig, and we know the attractiveness of that type of economic activity, if we can call it thusly. It is to enrich certain individuals. So we should no longer talk about the lack of medical supplies. We should no longer talk about the wages or lack thereof received by NEP workers. We should no longer talk about the poor pensions or pensioners having to scrape a living, because most of the money does not inure to the benefit of Dominicans. It is to create wealth for certain persons who have no sweat on their brows. That is the insidiousness of that type of activity. And as someone like Thompson or a local economist will say, there is no ripple or triple effect. There's no multiplier effect, because the money being spent does not inure to the benefits, because Dominican workers disproportionately are not represented in the workforces that are building these edifices all over the Dominica. Contractors are not being given jobs. Truckers have to be agitating to carry a little bucket of sand. They have to sit on the side while foreign workers are given the choice contracts for these types of activities. Local businesses have been shut down. This is what's happening, because they cannot compete with a foreign entity who pays, reportedly, very little custom duties. How can they compete? I listened to a program not too long ago. I heard that businesses, for example, have to give away 55 cents out of every dollar that they earn. What a joke. Environmental taxes, garçon. Huh? In every town, QS, village in Dominica, you have garbage being piled up. Go to the dump at Foncolé, and yet they're collecting, what's the name of it again? Environmental taxes. And we cannot even collect garbage in the nature island of the Caribbean. This is the cancer that has blighted Dominica and is blighting Dominica. It may not be dead, but it's on life water. The problem, Mr. G, is that it is the so-called ordinary, hardworking Dominica, but not just only middle-class individuals, even persons with some economic means. They have been adversely affected by what is happening to Dominica's resources. And we are paying, and we will pay, a huge price for standing by and not taking a stand against the rape of their own country. And that is the unkindest cut of all. And if you're a literature student, Mr. G, you remember that phrase, et tu brute. You of all people are putting that knife in my back. Your own kind, someone from your own community, are stabbing you in the back. That is the problem that we face, my friends. And we have to find adequate or proper leaders or leadership to rescue us, to issue a call, Lazarus, step out of that grave. That is the only hope that we have, speaking metaphorically. Someone could innovate and give life to those enterprises that sustained us. You see, they used to make fun of Edward O. Leblanc. They used to say that he's a one-crop thinker in terms of the economy. But even in the 60s, we had agro-industry. We had dump fruit. We had other industries. We had a coconut fiber mattress industry, Mr. G. I know you still hold on to your own with great love and affection. What do we have now with all the resources we have, with AI, for God's sakes? I'm IA, so that's a different proposition totally. You know, with all those social media initiatives or opportunities that now exist, with markets available, the whole question of agricultural produce, which is chemical free, a health industry, an essence of perfume industry. All these are avenues that could be exploited for the benefit of Dominicans, because it is they who would be participating in those types of industries. But no, we don't want that. There's no kickbacks in these activities, for God's sakes. It's a terrible indictment on what's happening in Dominica as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Now, Lambi, you want to take a call?
Good evening, caller. Thanks for waiting. Go ahead, please.
Well, you lost that caller.
Just hold on. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Yeah, don't worry, Dr. Andre owe me a top up. I'll catch him. Don't worry him. Blessings to you all, gentlemen.
Blessings to you.
And eternally indebted, grateful and thankful for the sacrifices and the efforts. Mr. G, did I hear Dr. Andre say you still have your fiber mattress?
Yes, he said that. I still have it.
Thanks to you all. Just quickly, I picked up a little thing on the ad pertaining to the program. You have a cluster of regional criminals who want to be compensated for phasing out a Ponzi scheme, a CBI Ponzi scheme. So maybe they might couple it with reparation for slavery and say they need compensation or reparation. It is sickening and it is sad. I have heard a term you can match and chew gum. It's a military term. When you're busy stealing, accumulating wealth and mansions and not wanting the money to be the monies to be traced, so you're hiding it in concrete, building mansions upon mansions. I don't know if you know about a little village in Mount Daniel they call Domizuela, and the prime minister name is Maziro. So, they're building a lot of mansions up there, mansions, the house of that secret, look something opposite it and all of that. So with all that scheming and planning and plotting, the machination, you cannot govern a country at the same time. Particularly, it's a unilateral approach to governance, and you want children to be the players on your team. It's young. Everybody has to be young. 18, 19 years and a little higher. Not too much experience. We do not want too much experience there. So I am just saying what is happening in Dominica is no coincidence. It's no accident, because it's something somebody has calculated and have that end result where Dominicans are leaving Dominica in droves because the Chinese and every other foreign company or whatever is engaged in either hiding billions for the government or selling passports, or engaged in some eternal construction, and everything seems to be failing. Kempinski, the Lyre River Hotel, and many, many, many things in Dominica where there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel, much less for inside of the tunnel. And Dominicans really think, maybe they don't know what they're doing. I believe a few of them, criminally minded as they are, know exactly what they're doing, and the ramifications or the consequences is of no consideration to them, because guess what? They nest have a lot of feathers. Thanks for the time.
Well, and thank you so much for that intervention, Dr. Andre, or your name was mentioned by the caller. I don't know if you want to make some quick remarks on his, but let me just take a call from Lambi before you come on.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, gentlemen, Mr. G, and the rest of the panel.
Yes, good evening.
I'm listening to the conversation, very, very enlightening as usual, very engaging. The CBI program, when the government went into what they did, I remember when the discussion came about the missing $6 billion, missing $1 million. And so the Prime Minister in 2019 said at St. Joseph at the rally that when the audit will be done, it will put Lennox Linton into shame and it will show that he's not fit of being Prime Minister for us to hold the vital Ministry of Finance. That was in 2019. We're in 2026 and we have not seen that report. In fact, I think the Prime Minister of Dominica and Dominica's government should be ashamed to be part of the group that issued that statement. The OECS made a statement regarding the CBI and how well they manage the CBI. You see, in Dominica, the operation had to go to court. They're in court now, asking for the CBI information to be released. And if you run a program that is in the interest of the country, why should you have it hidden that you have to go to court, pay lawyers, bring lawyers down to pay them to go to court to get the information as to how the CBI is run? Because we're just hearing things happening, but we don't have the details as to how the CBI is run. And I think these guys took this thing for a joke. And if you notice, the Prime Minister of Antigua, the Prime Minister of Grenada, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts, and the Prime Minister of Dominica believe that they are in, some kind of chicken noodle approach to governance. And they're lucky that they have been able to use CBI resources to buy votes and to stay in office. And you notice they're more interested in power than in governing and creating the atmosphere for people's lives to be improved and so on. But we could still say, though, if you look at the 4 islands I mentioned, excluding the 5 excluding Dominica now, so the 4 other islands, they kept the pillars of the economy. They kept it watered, the tourism, the cocoa, the nutmegs, and so on. And the CBI came to them almost like icing on the cake. I mean, we are hearing that the CBI in their country has some little foul play, but generally, the people of these islands feel that the CBI sometimes assist. In Dominica, the CBI is only assisting a few people, and so on. And therefore, we do not have the same opportunity that the 4 other islands have. So 2028, as Europeans ask, if we face out the CBI, Dominica will suffer more than these other islands, because these other islands kept their economic pillars watered, while we throw our own down in the drain. We allow our bananas, our agriculture to just run out. See, the roads have been abandoned, farmers are screaming, and we focus on the passport, silver passport, and felt that is the main source of our economy. And therefore, we find ourselves where we are now. And the Prime Minister himself has said If it's not CBI, then what? And I've heard the Prime Minister myself, I saw Oliver have heard him himself, where he said that when they did some projects, he said they did not go and impose taxes. It was on CBI money, as if all the CBI is their dashing, they plant, and therefore they feel free to do what they want with it, give who they want, and so on. So we're in a sad situation, Dominica, with this government, and they wouldn't have 100 economy. And once the 2028 common board on the European Union move on us, we're in serious problem. And people are taking these things for a joke. And even the Prime Minister, when they ask for due diligence and ethical standard, then they do a little piecemeal there and there and believe that is all, but never went deep into the CBI program to ensure that it served the economy, served the country, and the people of Dominica. And of course, to use the CBI to prop up the other economic pillars on the island. They use the CBI for few people. You see some people build their hotels, some people come in, they have their hotels, they play big shot, and that's all it is. And I think it is very unfortunate that Dominica finds itself in that situation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your intervention there. I suspect that, and I certainly would hope that the Prime Minister would address the nation very shortly and to really give us an update as to what transpired at that meeting with the other heads of the OECS last week. Because, I mean, obviously the government did not disclose to us that they had received a letter from the European Union on the CBI program and the phasing out of it until 28. So, I mean, let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope that the Prime Minister will in fact address the nation and bring us up to speed on this, and we'll take questions from reporters at a press conference on that matter. But, you know, Crispin, as Mark mentioned, the U.S. looks at the area, I mean, from a strategic, not just from a national security point of view, but really from a point of view of we're in bed with some of the people who they consider the number one enemies, so to speak, or competitors. Lam, you want to take a call?
Yes. Paula, please go ahead.
Yeah, Lambi, thank you for taking my call, Mr. G, Dr. Andre, and His Excellency Mr. Crispin Gregoire, and
Mark Douglas.
Mr. Douglas. Good evening. But Mr. G, my question is for our ambassador. I want to know, didn't the European Union gave the CBI countries, including Dominica, stipulation in which they could have fixed the program? And I remember one of them was that all revenues that derive from the sale of passport has to go back to that country. And I think that is where the problem is, because Dr. Andre said, the resources is hijacked by foreigners. Dominica is not in charge of this money. Billions of dollars, and what effect it have on Dominica? So I think the program, Mr. J, it's dead and it's on ice. They ain't buried yet, but it's still on ice. Because Roosevelt Scary cannot give account to what happened to them billions of dollars derived from that program. And there is a matter before the court. He always talking about transparency, but Dominican has to go to court to find out what happened to that money. He tell you, oh, you see, we build school, we build houses, we build hospital, we build health centers. Well, tell us how much it costs. Tell us how much you pay for material labor. Give us a detail we want to know. But majority of the money is a high scheme. 90 for you, 10 for me. Or 90 for me, 10 for you. And that's why Dominica facing now, we cannot travel as we used to. Everybody watching Dominican passport like it don't worth nothing. So that program is on ice. We're just waiting for it to be buried. Thank you.
And thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. Now, Crispin, well, you're on, because I mean that question was put directly to you. But I just wanted to quote from somebody on Facebook. There are quite a few people on Facebook following us. One person said that, let me see, imagine them demons making so much wealth, yet they will tell Clay Harbor US $20 per hour is too much for a Dominican. Your turn, Crispin. You're muted. You need to unmute your mic.
This is my, yeah. I welcome the question from the caller, and yes, caller, the European Union did underscore the vital importance of all these monies being in our consolidated fund, that it must be in the country. And you raised a very important point, caller, and when you said that, have they ever told us what do these projects cost? I would like to know how much the Kempinski cost, because they sold 800 passports and they raised 180 million US dollars. Now, have they ever told us how much it cost to build the Kempinski? Have they ever told us how the different hotels cost? No. It means that the people, these agents, and that is that's the bane of this problem. When you have agents who are also developers of hotels, so they're not selling for the Dominican people, they're selling to build assets for themselves. And the Kempinski Hotel is now under management of the Intercontinental. These are just, Kempinski never put a penny in that hotel, That hotel was paid for by our passports. But the guys who did the project, they were range. Their case is well documented in the Supreme Court of New York State. That's where we learned the details of the money. And that's a good example of what happened to the money. That these developers have pocketed most of the money. And a lot of that money is in Dubai, which today, I wouldn't want to go to Dubai now. And some of them want to go to Dubai to check on how much money is still left there. And they're afraid because Iran is bombing Dubai all the time. They're bombing the Emirates. That's the country that is the worst place to go. It's not safe. And that's where our money is. But I do think, like Dr. Andre, it's on the program is on life support. It may not die completely because all the future governments might have to rescue it and put in the due diligence and put in the requirements to make sure that the program can continue as an area for which we can raise investment. I would hate to see it completely die, but as it is now, it will die if it continues that way. Now, here's the thing. The Europeans said to us that by 2028, June, the program must close. Otherwise, we will not have visa-free entry into Europe, right? But they didn't just say that it's going to end in 2028. They put two conditions from now to 2028. One, they must exclude anyone subject to European Union restrictive measures. So they cannot sell passports to anybody that the Europeans would not approve of. That's one. The second one, they want reinforced vetting for applicants of every nationality. So you cannot just sell passports willy-nilly to anybody. They're going to want to know who you're selling the passports to. So already these leaders, and Mr. G asked us, is the gig up for our leaders? Yes, the gig is up for our leaders because all of them are now under scrutiny, not only by Europe, but also by United States. And Mark, before Mark will speak after me, and Mark mentioned something important, and that is, he talked about the larger context of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump's regional strategy, that the Americas They don't want any foreign powers coming there and mess around. And one of the things that the Secretary of State Rubio is very focused on is corruption in these islands. And they're going to deal with corruption with a hammer. See, I never fought. I always fought. I knew there was corruption. I mean, I've watched this government as it evolved over the years. I worked for this government for a while, and when I left, things went haywire. And these governments now have to account to a higher authority. And then now we are seeing that our police force in Dominica, who has treated the opposition forces with brutality, now have to account to outside force to tell them to clean up corruption in Dominica. That's that is what happened in this last week. So this cryptocurrency thing, I'm not going to dwell on it a lot. All to say that though, it is a branch of the original security service called IMPACS that is dealing with white-collar crime and corruption that is now taking action, not only in Dominica, but St. Lucia. We had a minister who he himself told the St. Lucian people he was arrested. Antigua, they arrest as well. So forces outside the jurisdiction of those islands is now putting them under the hammer. And I'm very happy for that. Now, last point, and that is, Mr. G posed many questions to us, and I only pick in one or two of them. He says, if the CBI program suddenly derails, which appears likely, will Dominica's national and capital budget collapse? Well, over the last 10 years, we've seen how 60% of the capital budget has come from CBI. And it's because our tax base has declined. Mark mentioned about Ross University. We lost 30% of our economy when Ross left. 30%. We cannot rebuild that with CBI. CBI has not helped us to rebuild the loss of Ross University. So we've reached what I call a fork in the road. And I don't know if we have enough strength to make sure the fork is brought back in what a fork really looks like. So I think that I see that there's a kind of a hustle now towards a new election, even though that election is due in 2028, that same year. Maybe the reason why they are hustling to have an early election in Dominica is because they know that 2028 is a year of destruction. But strange enough, 2028 is our 50th anniversary of political independence. And are we at this juncture in 2026? We haven't even started talking about 2028 and the 50th anniversary. But that 50th anniversary is not looking good. And that's what I'll say. Thank you, Mr. G.
Yeah, thank you, Crispin. Now, Mark, I know that you wanted to expand on this discussion on corruption and the money laundering and so on. But I mean, you did in fact mention the loss of Ross and the revenue that was lost from Ross. I mean, we know that the opposition is now in court trying to determine where the money is, where the CBI money is. And wouldn't it have been great if a lot of these billions of dollars were used to strengthen the structures of the economy? to transform them like your agriculture and your agribusiness and your tourism and your tech industries and manufacturing and so on, which we've lost so much manufacturing. So give me your comments on some of that, and you can also talk about the corruption and the money laundering.
All right, thank you, Mr. G. My comment earlier on about how we arrived at choosing CBI as the primary driver of our economy, what dovetails with that is that there are other ideas. Every challenge that you have is an opportunity, I think, in business. And so this current challenge that we're having with the CBI, a program that in its most simplest form, if I were to give you an analogy, I am selling a ticket to stay at Mr. G's house. And that's how I make most of my income. Mr. G doesn't get anything out of that. And Mr. G at any point can say, you know what, I don't care if Mark gave you this ticket, you're not coming in. That perhaps may be a strategy that we should use to extract as much money as we can, but we cannot say that that is the fundamental pillars of our economic strategy going forward. Just think about how it works in a most reduced form. But there's perhaps a reason why, from a political perspective, it's so tantalizing, why it's so addictive, and you can't get away from it. Ideas like Ross just aren't as appealing. You see, Ross is a publicly traded company in the United States. And so its officers and directors are subject to the laws of the United States. I remember over a decade ago, I had a case as a young attorney. I worked in a group of maybe 10 attorneys on this case, where our client was accused of paying bribes. A client was a large company in the United States, was accused of paying bribes to Chinese officials to get those officials to buy our client's products. And the US government brought charges against the executives within the American company that were paying those bribes. Because we have a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that makes it illegal for an American CEO or director or other officer to pay a bribe in a foreign country. Now, if you are the CEO of Ross's parent company, Adtalem Global Education, you're living a very comfortable life, you're making a lot of money. Why would you risk your freedom to pay a bribe to a Dominican official? That wouldn't be worth it to you. So you would make it very clear to all involved, that is not something I'm interested in. My freedom and this great lifestyle that I've been blessed with, I'm not putting that at risk because you want a bribe. Now, I'm not saying that any particular person has taken bribes, but bribes exist all around the world. And one of the things that the CBI program perhaps allows people in various countries to do is to launder money. And so, I remember when I got the call from Dr. G to participate in this evening's panel, I said, I have to do some research about some of the topics. And I came across an advisory from the Department of Treasury from the year 2020. Actually, no, from the year 2000. And so this is a long time ago that they identified Dominica as a country that American financial institutions had to apply stricter scrutiny to their transactions because of certain concerns that they had with Dominica. One concern that they had was the way Dominica defined money laundering. See, in the United States, money laundering is a mechanism you use to disguise ill-gotten gains, money that you obtain through illegal activities. So it's very broad. It could include a number of things. It could include accepting a bribe. That's illegal. But at the time, the US Treasury said, Dominica defines money laundering too strictly. They only define money laundering to include crimes linked to narcotic-related offenses. So if you're a drug dealer. So they wanted Dominica to have a broader definition of money laundering, to include other ill-gotten gains. Now, I can see that being very problematic if you are getting your ill-gotten gains through, let's say, a bribe. You do not want to create a law in Dominica that makes that illegal. There was also the supervision of offshore banks was an issue. Now, what happens when the US government, the Department of Treasury, instructs financial institutions to pay stricter scrutiny to Dominica's financial transactions that involve Dominica, i.e. money that's coming from Dominica or more likely coming into Dominica? Some of those transactions are put on hold. Some of those transactions actually are never executed. So let's take, for instance, you have a family member right now that's has fallen ill. They've gone to China Friendship Hospital, and I know this happened recently with one of my family members. They needed to have an operation, but China Friendship indicated that they needed certain medication. They also needed to have IV, and that had to be paid for out of pocket. So family members decided we'll come together and we'll all send a contribution. What if that contribution is held up because the United States Department of Treasury determines that the level of corruption involved with the CBI program or other money laundering activities is too high, and so that money never arrives to its destination? At that point, your only recourse is perhaps to go to the financial center and beg that the PM is gracious and perhaps pays for your medication. But there are real world consequences to money laundering for the average Dominican. We live in a large interconnected financial network, and in order for money to arrive from one part of the globe to another, very often it has to pass through intermediary banks. And those intermediary banks are controlled by larger powers that right now seem to have us on their radar and seem to want to exert as much pressure on us as possible. So, when we think about money laundering and cryptocurrencies, we're not thinking about the average Dominican. The average Dominican is probably never going to buy and sell a Bitcoin. A Bitcoin, trades for about 60,000 US probably at this time. A few months ago, it was trading for over 100,000 US. The average Dominican doesn't buy and sell Bitcoins. So necessarily, if crypto corruption, as the topic implies, is an issue in our region, it's not the common person that's engaging in those activities. With those sums of monies that are going back and forth, we're dealing with individuals with much higher net worth. We're probably dealing with some of our officials. And how does cryptocurrency facilitate what they need to do? Well, you know, politicians, let's say, or government officials, if they wanted to accept a bribe, let's say that they had the authority to appoint an individual, and these are real world cases. I'm not saying this is Dominica. I'm actually saying these cases exist outside of Dominica as to how cryptocurrency facilitates corruption in government. If you have the authority to make an appointment and that appointment is worth something, you can then accept funds to appoint a particular person. Those funds you don't want appearing in your bank account. You don't want a trace of it. So cryptocurrency allows some anonymous person to submit the currency to you in an anonymous account, never linked to you, but you now have access to those funds to trade them and someday monetize them into l'argent sèche, as we know. These things happen on a real world level. They don't involve the average Dominican, but they do have real world consequences for the average Dominican when they're stopped.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Mark, on the corruption and the crypto thing. Dr. Andre, I mean, we've seen what has happened. You listened to Matt's program, and he had a long talk about this thing, and Kenneth Ridjock gave a report on what was going on in this crypto corruption. And basically, what is going on in money laundering. Give us your further thoughts on what you think may be transpiring in Dominica in terms of corruption and this crypto corruption and money laundering.
Well, again, you know, we can base our opinion on what transpires or what have transpired in Dominica as we speak. Like I said, the evidence is clear, anecdotal or otherwise. We have seen or we have borne witness to the rapid accumulation of wealth to an extent which cannot be explained by the legitimate income of those who seem to have access to that wealth. And there are no more shares in Dominica. We have seen the preference for certain type of economic activity, the building of hotels. And we know that that type of activity has only one justification: to money launder. Why? Because the occupancy rates of many of these new hotels, the established ones, have better percentages in terms of guests, but they hover between 10 and 20%. 20% might be generous. I made reference in one of your programs to a colleague who vacationed in Dominica within the past year at Kempinski. And he came back shocked, and he said it was like a ghost town. This big hotel, and he was the only guest. Thank God he knew nothing about Sukuyans, for example, because he would have taken off and run away. So we know that these are not viable entities. They have a specific, nefarious, illegal purpose. There's a house in Rosa called the House of Dark Secrets. It's been shut down. We don't know why. There's evidence as to who owns it. A historical building was destroyed to build that edifice, that monstrosity. But that is the mentality. There is no reverence or respect for anything historic, for anything which would set us out as a place to visit. Because look at how well they preserve the historical footprint of the country, of the colony. Look at how well they preserve the old plantations. Look at how well they are concerned and they seek to preserve their own history. None of that. None of that. Look at how many trips to Dubai, Mr. G. I heard they selling dashing over there. Or probably I should refer to that song by this Dominican Calypsonian. It's cocoa they're selling over there, Mr. G, in Dubai or Switzerland. You see how the cronies love these countries? I wonder why. And we know why. So the whole question of democracy, the whole question of governance, and we've heard, you know, various speeches by statespeople, not statesmen, statespeople, about upliftment of your people through education, through empowerment, through production. There's none of that in Dominica. There's nobody's been uplifted. The goal is dependency. You get an apartment, you don't get title. You're told you have to attend every meeting that is being held. And if you don't attend, your neighbor is going to report you. And you jeopardize your claim or your ability to remain in that modest apartment. Or if you are a resident of La Plaine, you scream and shout, beat me again so I can get my house and another one. That is what you've reduced your own people. These are not slave owners, you know, Mr. G, doing that to Dominicans. These are not foreign slave owners who are doing that to Dominicans. Your own flesh and blood. Set families against family members. Family members who are deprived of help cannot get assistance from their own relative. This is what's happening. This is the state of dependency. Leaders boasting about how much money foreigners earned and sent abroad, while their own people, quite frankly, they have to be satisfied and they have to make do with 1% increase. Let's make it 2. Let's be generous. In Dominica, at a time when we have access, Mark stressed the word access. It's not access to these countries, but access to resources, financial resources from the CBI program. And we are denied, patently and blatantly denied access to those financial resources that could perhaps have made us the Cinderella of the Eastern Caribbean. What kind of crime is that? What has or have Dominicans done to deserve that type of punishment? The leaders love to say that, you know, our house, there are many mansions. And I have said before, yes, but there are many prisons in Dominica. And sadly, if we don't break the chains of those bars, we will remain in a state of perpetual dependency. And that is a fate, quite frankly, which we don't deserve. We have a long history of struggle. Anyone who has any passing reference or passing interest in Dominica's history, particularly slave revolt, particularly the struggles of the Kalinago people, we look at this with disgust, that we have been reduced to a state where we cannot even ask too loudly for an increase in our income or salary, because we will be viewed as enemies of the state. While your leader drives a vehicle costing over $100,000, guarded by 12 police officers with the ubiquitous knapsacks on their backs, come to you say, whatever. The whole question is, there's a papi show economy that we have. You know, we have to show that we have our own oligarchy in Dominica. Those who can live beyond the means of any other Dominican. Because we have arrived. We're now part of the show, the bunch. We can go to, what's the name of the place? In Europe, Monaco or whatever it is. Dubai. You remember what that Chinese fellow said about the folks who went shopping in, which Chinese, what is it again? Whatever Chinese country. how they were just glorying in buying watches, and they were seeking absolutions from ladies of the night. That is their definition of statecraft, Mr. G. How can we be surprised today in 2026 that we're in this state when that is what has passed for governance over the last 25 years? But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There are the lyrics of Jimmy Cliff, I think. It's gonna be a bright, sunny day. One day. And the only persons who can make that day bright, quite frankly, are the people of Dominica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Now, Crispin, well, you want to, coming down to the close of the program, I'm sure there are certain talking points that we did not really get to flesh out. You may want to make your comments on some of those, or anything else that you have in mind on the topic here tonight.
Yes. Well, one of them is, has the European Union and the US put a final nail in the CBI coffin? Well, they certainly have put it high on their agenda for each of these countries. But in the particular case of Dominica and Antigua, I think these are the two countries that have the worst deficiencies. And it's going to be very, very difficult for them to clean up their act.
Now, Crispin, let me ask you earlier on, do you believe there is credence then in what Mark, I think, may have mentioned, that the US is looking beyond just the CBI and the national security issues, but is looking at our relationships with countries like China and Venezuela and Cuba?
Oh, most definitely. When I think of the presence of the Chinese in the Caribbean, Dominica is certainly on the front lines, because I believe with this airport construction, which we are told is supposed to be financed by passports, I think that the American government has another view, and that is that airport is actually, they think, being financed by the Chinese government. Now, what worries me about the airport is that we might see history repeat itself. What happened in Grenada in 1983, when the US intervened in Grenada and stopped the airport, because the airport was being built by the Cubans, financed by the Soviets, and the US told them to go home. There was a firefight, and of course, a number of Cuban soldiers were people working on the airport who had military training, they were killed. I would not be surprised if that happens in Dominica. I would not, because, and it's an easy one actually, because this time, how they sold that project is that it's being financed by passport sales, and that Dominicans would have no debt. And furthermore, that this company got a no-bid contract. And that is one of the things that Secretary of State Rubio raised with the Eastern Caribbean prime ministers when they met last year in March in Washington, along with the Bahamian prime minister. Rubio said, you know, when you give no-bid contracts to Chinese companies, that's the Communist Party of China that you're giving this contracts to. But I am not convinced that this story about it's passport money that's financing that airport. But I may be wrong, Mr. G, but you know, I'm skeptical about what has been told to the Dominican people on that question. Now, it will be very simple for the US to given what Mark has laid out and the Donald Trump doctrine for the region. They could simply tell that company, CR5 Railway Company, to go home. You know, they wouldn't be offending the Chinese. They'll just say, one of your companies got a no-bid contract in Dominica and they're doing environmental degradation in Dave Wash. So they should pack up. So the future of that airport is in question. So that's one. So what I'm saying is that what played out in Grenada in 1983 could play out in Dominica in 2026 or 2027. So that's one. But you also asked, and whether CBI is a national security risk. Well, if you look at CBI as the financing of a Chinese asset in Dominica, it is a national security risk to the United States, without question. The other thing I wanted to raise is that, we talked a lot about Europe. We didn't talk about England, UK. They put a visa requirement on us 3 years ago. And Dominicans didn't really understand why. Do you know why? And I want to say that to the Dominican people tonight. The reason is a lot of people with the Dominica passports, not natural born Dominicans, entering UK when there was no visa requirement. And then they apply for asylum in UK. That was what was going on. So they said, oh, that's what you all are doing? Okay, we're going to shut down this thing and we will require a visa requirement. And it hurts our people because we have a large diaspora in England, and our people from time immemorial, from the time I was born, you could go to England without visa. Now, to go and see your family in England, you need a visa. We don't have a British embassy in Dominica. You have to go to Barbados to get one. And the chances of you being denied is real. So, it's hurting us. It's hurting our people. And it's time for our people to wake up. Now, our people in England have not organized to lobby the British government to say, don't hurt us natural born Dominicans. We need to stand up as Dominicans and say to the Europeans, don't hurt us, the natural born Dominicans. Our government don't care about us. That's why they're doing the course of action they're doing, and now they've put us in jeopardy. And so we can't go to Europe anymore. We can't go to England anymore. And pretty soon, well, the US has already shut us from coming. Not even our students can get student visa to go and study in the US now. So we really have reached what I said before, that fork in the road. We've reached this inflection point that the Dominican people must wake up and smell the coffee. That's it, Mr. G, for me.
Now, before I let you go, Crispin, could you give us some examples of the type of people, the categories of people who got these Dominican passports from some of these countries, and who may have been entering the UK and seeking asylum? I mean, because we understand that these passports are sold to Russians, sold to Pakistanis, they were sold to Iranians, they were sold to all kind of people. Give us a few examples. And some of those too may have had diplomatic passports.
Yes, well, we've had, Dominica is credited with having a business selling diplomatic passports. And even to the extent that there was a case which most Dominicans don't know about. There was a case when we took Switzerland to court at the International Court of Justice around 2007, because a Russian man, we were fighting for him because the Swiss said he's persona non grata in Switzerland. He had the Dominica diplomatic passport. He was our ambassador to Switzerland, and the Swiss sent him home. He lives in Monaco, and he got the Dominica government to take Switzerland to court. I could write a book on that because, I was the ambassador at the UN and I had to deal with it. And thank God for President Liverpool, who said that can't stand. But that did not get in the public domain. I have the file and I will write about it one of these days. But the thing is that, Mr. G, we sold passports to Iranians. And Dominica seemed to be the only country in the 5 who found that niche. The agents, we lost control of the program. So the agents start selling to Iranians, much to the dismay of the United States. You don't sell, I would not sell passports to Iranians because it raised a red flag right away. But these passports end up in the hands of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, of which Alariza Monfared was one of them. He, not only did he have a CBI passport, he became Dominica's ambassador to Malaysia. So then there's a place called Kurdistan, which is the autonomous region of Iraq. Almost everybody in the government in that place has Dominica passport. Then you have drug dealers from different places. You have Russians. One of the reasons why the British also put a visa requirement on us is when the Ukraine war happened, they insisted that passports to Russians must stop. Dominica continued to sell. We have a hotel in Loda that's financed by passports sold to Russians. So, this is just give you a snapshot of what we've done, what our irresponsible government has done and continues to do. But now the chickens have come to roost and they can't clean up the act. So it's left now to the Dominican people to understand that it's not business as usual. Our country is tarnished overseas, tarnished. And there's not enough paint in the world to wipe it clean.
Thanks a lot, Crispin. Mark, we're coming down to the wire now. And so your further thoughts on this topic and whatever else that you had in mind to comment on tonight, and let that be your closing remarks.
Thank you. It's been a rich and informative discussion. Thank you for according me the opportunity to participate in it. Ambassador Gregoire just said something that, frankly, it puzzled me. In that it's what's reported, but I don't see how mechanically it works. He spoke about you asked him about, Mr. G, about the type of individuals that would find themselves in the UK under a citizenship by investment program. Not necessarily just Dominicas, but the other countries within the region that have similar programs. And they would apply, and this was reported, that the UK has seen an uptick in individuals applying for asylum under these programs, or after they obtain passports. What doesn't make sense to me is the requirement for asylum is that, generally speaking, is that you must be faced with persecution because of your religion, your race, some other social group in your home country. And so here it is that you've acquired a passport to a lovely place like Dominica. A lot of people think that Dominica is paradise. I certainly think at times that it is paradise. And yet you're applying for asylum, although you have the opportunity to stay in paradise. You are applying for asylum on the basis that you need to escape persecution from your home country. That mechanically, I don't see how it works, and perhaps that's why the European Union countries that are encountered with or confronted with such applications are puzzled by the narrative. How does that make sense? Now, in closing, I'd like to come back to what I started with, which is how did we arrive here using this program as the fundamental pillar of our economy? And say, let's learn from our past. It is what it is. We are where we are. You can't dwell on that. really your focus needs to be, where do we go from here? But I recall that there was a wise man that once said, the best clue of what's possible in the future, the only clue of what's possible in the future, is perhaps what has happened in the past. So let's learn from our past. When we go to Dominica, we see names of imperial powers that have fought for control over our country all over the place. Roseau by the French. We are a former British colony. Those powers threw us around like a pawn on a chessboard. We do not want to be the pawn on the chessboard to neo-colonial powers. And those powers are the United States with the Monroe Doctrine and China. Now, I would say that one of the things that I would credit the Prime Minister for is that he has the type of personality that tries to make friends of everyone. But when you're dealing with a Donald Trump who starts every cabinet meeting requiring that members of his cabinet speak how greatly he is as a leader, how he's deserving of a Nobel Peace Prize, you have very little wiggle room to embrace China and embrace the United States at the same time. And whereas you may be able to convince Dominicans that you are building a multi-billion-dollar airport without any loans, without any debt, on your sale of passports that grant access to other countries, and that is sustainable, you probably won't convince Donald Trump of that. He's probably asking for more of you than what you're offering to your people. So I think that we have to look back at our past, look at what has worked for us, embrace legitimate businesses that employ and empower average Dominicans. We're only as strong as a country if the common man is doing well, if the common man says, I'm going to feed my family, man or woman, not by begging the PM for a handout or a cool out, but because I have the opportunity here to sell this product, to sell this service that is in demand. If you would have asked us to forget about the history of Ross in this country and think, would it have been possible to start an American medical school that qualifies American doctors in Dominica and have that sustain 30% of our economy? There are more Rosses out there. I think we need to embrace those type of businesses that are more intuitive to our sustainability than thinking we can continue selling access to America. Because Trump may not get a third term. A Democrat might come in and those policies may be rescinded and CBI may start flourishing again. But do we really want to wait for the next Trump to come into power and then find ourselves wondering how are we going to fund the essential elements of our economy? How are we going to invest in our economy? We don't have to do that. So I think we should use this as an opportunity to pivot and move in a more sustainable direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot for those final words. Crispin, you want to make a closing remark? You need to unmute your mic.
We need to say, Mr. G, that
Yeah.
I worry. I worry about the stability of our beautiful island. I think that those people who always ask, if not CBI, tell me what, I'll say to them, you need to look at building a sustainable economy. And Dominica has the natural resources to build a sustainable economy. And those people who have chastised Dr. Fontaine, who said that he will phase out or phase down CBI, they better embrace Dr. Fontaine's view, because he's totally right. Maybe he knew that the European Union was going to strike. That's why he made that statement days before. Very prophetic. So I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this program tonight with the esteemed Mark Douglas and Dr. Andre. And I think it was really an enlightening session. Thank you.
Thank you, Crispin. Dr. Andre, you have the final word, but I mean, you can introduce in those final words any other thoughts that you had on any other aspects of the topic that tonight, which we may have overlooked.
One of our panelists made passing reference, I should say, to the whole phenomenon of reparations. Now, in principle, I support the drive for reparations. But let me ask this question. Reparations to whom? Tell me, reparations to whom? Would you give some of our leaders in the Eastern Caribbean monies in the name of reparations and leave it to them to decide how to spend that money? Mr. G, I repeat what somebody in the market told me once, your head not good? What about reparations given to the Kalinago people by Hugo Chavez? What happened to it? What happened to the so-called reparations? We can call it reparations. Given by the World Bank, is it the World Bank, to Dominica post-Maria to alleviate suffering in Dominica? What did our leaders do with the money? You really honestly think that this drive for reparations somewhat will cleanse the past, be a redemptive oil poured on the heads of these leaders, making them more sensitive to suffering, making them more answerable to people? No. So the whole drive for reparations in a cynical way is a mask. Because if you cannot trust your own leaders to act on behalf of their own people, then what is the significance of reparations? Who is it going to? To build another house of dark secrets? To fatten the pockets of those in power? To increase their salaries? Not to spend money on the local hospital? Not to improve the lives of your people? The whole drive to get reparations, in my respectful view, should start with the efforts of Dominicans on the ground. Let them repair themselves psychologically and economically and financially and politically. That is where the repairs have to be done. They have to get reparations, not in the sense of getting a handout because they will never reap the benefits, but in repairing the psychological, economical, financial, and political damage that they have suffered over the decades, because they are the biggest loser. So I end tonight with this thought. Reparations start within. Reparations should not mean a big fat check from some European or North American entity to these governments. because the money may not even trickle down to those who are most in need of it. That is the problem. Reparations have to start within ourselves. We have to show that we can take our history in our own hands and we can make that history serve the Dominican people. We have a rich history of innovation, of industry, soap being made in the 30s by Elias Nassif, by people like Nan Ducre's father, making wines and so on. Soft drinks being manufactured locally way back. Money God making dumb fruit starting in the late 40s and continuing in the 50s and 60s until he was forced to declare bankruptcy. We use the core fiber of coconuts to make mattresses. I've alluded to that before. We've made a number of things. What about bellow? What about that indigenous industry that we have? All the government has to do is to get markets. And today in 2026, there's a move to go natural, to go organic. Natural healing. What about all those herbs that we have? What about the bay oil industry, the perfume industry? What about excavating the past, the industrial past, the creative past? These are the reparations that will serve the Dominican people the most. Not some fat check that will go to some leader's pocket for electoral purposes. Reparation should begin with our own selves, within us. And that is the message I leave to Dominicans on the ground. Are you prepared to be involved in that wonderful initiative, excursion, odyssey to make your own reparations? Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Well, I must say excellent contributions coming from all of our panelists here tonight, from you, Dr. Andre, from former Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, and from Mac Douglas. You know, a young man, but, you know, very intelligent, very deep, very substantive. Mac, it's good to get to know you. I just want to say good night to all these folks and thank you to all these folks who are following us on Facebook and on YouTube and on the radio and on their telephones and wherever you are in the nook and cranny of any community in Dominica, in the region and globally. Thank you for staying with us for this couple of hours. And we will see you again next time, maybe next Tuesday on another topic. But gentlemen, I just want to say a pleasant good night to each and every one of you. And thank you so much for your contributions to this program tonight. Good night, Lambie. Good night, Sherwin. Good night, Dr. Andre. Good night, Crispin. Good night, Mark. Take care, everybody. Talk to you another time soon. Bye for now.
View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View